First of all, a third of our population lives in regional Australia, so that's a lot of people that live there that and form a very important part of our country. 1 in 15 people live in some of those more regional areas, so it's very important that we look at that. You talked about Indigenous communities. We like to say it's about place, not race. So what we need to do is have a look at where the communities are. A lot of them are sustainable. Just because they're small or remote doesn't mean they're not proactive and very productive communities. For example, I was at a community called Mount Margaret, which is between Leonora and Laverton in Western Australia. It is an Indigenous community. It is very productive. It's got a school. It's got a police force. It's got people that are very proactively adding to that community. So we can't actually take a one-size-fits-all approach and say you've just got to shut them down on size. You've also then got to look at the fact that it's not easy to move people. So once again, you know, in Western Australia, the town of Wittenoom, the asbestos town that people would know about, do you know, even up until really recently, there were still 6 people living in that town. So it's just not that easy to pick people up and say, we're going to close your town down. On the other hand, if you actually can work with the community to say, how can we talk about relocating you? That's when you start to get engagement. And we saw that in Grantham in Queensland. Following the floods, they actually managed to relocate about 80% of that community to higher ground. So what is very important about these communities is about saying that one size doesn't fit all. It's not about shutting them down. It's about having a conversation with people in the community. Doesn't mean relocation. Where will those impacts be? Are these towns productive? What does it mean to actually make sure that they can continue to be proactively contributing to the economic fabric of the regions, which are just so important?
Malarndirri.
Sue's right, it's about conversations. Unfortunately, I don't think that conversations ever began, Sue. We've got over 150 communities that are certainly questioning their future now in terms of essential services that are going to be and proposed to be withdrawn. We just saw on Friday, Tony, you know, 4,000 to 5,000 people in Melbourne, which is a long way from WA, but there's still absolute concern right across this country on the way these decisions are being made. Let me tell you, the First Nations people in WA, and certainly the people that we spoke to, as some of our NITV News journalists went at Craig Quartermain, Danny Teese-Johnson and spoke to people. And they just said they won't leave country, you know, they will stay there because it is about the spirituality and the cultural affinity to that country. So I think if you're not having the conversation to begin with, you're setting yourself up for an incredibly big battle.
Is there an economic rationale to close down any of these communities?
It always comes back to economics, doesn't it, Tony, for non-Indigenous Australia? Yes.
That's certainly been the argument of the West Australian government.
Look, certainly. And, you know, when you look at the federal government's nearly, you know, $500 million cut from Aboriginal affairs right across the country, the roll-on impact in lots of different areas is having an impact. But let's look at the individual communities here. And you know, certainly as Sue has said, that it is about sustainability, and these communities are trying to look for ways to be able to do that. But if they haven't been included in a respectful way to be at the table to discuss their own future, it doesn't bode well for ongoing economics either.
Mitch Fifield, I'm sure you'll say this is a matter for the West Australian government. That doesn't mean you can't have an opinion.
Look, I think no one would question the Prime Minister's deep personal commitment to Indigenous Australians. And we...
Well, Noel Pearson did after this decision was announced.
And we, as a government, respect the connection that Indigenous people have with their land. I think there have been some crossed wires here on this particular issue. The Commonwealth Government is not closing down any communities. All we're doing in Western Australia is what we've done in other jurisdictions, is pass responsibility for municipal services to the state government. It's the situation in all Australian communities, other than some Indigenous communities, that it's state and local governments that have municipal responsibility.
So is that our hands are clean argument? We don't like it, but someone else is doing it?
No, it's just the facts, and that responsibility will transfer from the middle of this year. The Commonwealth is giving $90 million up front to the West Australian Government to assist with that transition, and my understanding is that the West Australian Government is going to engage in a period of consultation for 12 months, that the existing arrangements will at least be in place for 12 months. So we as a Commonwealth Government aren't doing anything other than ensuring that Indigenous Australians receive their municipal services the same way everyone else does, which is from state and local government.
Just a